Can the reinvention of vocational education help Arizona's economy and still encourage young people to go to college? Those who say yes are pushing the CTE model, career and technical education, and it's gaining notice.
The economic landscape has changed in the world, in the U.S., but in Arizona specifically as well. And CTE has evolved along with it.
It's understanding the economic impact that post-secondary education success, college success, if you will have on a student and a family.
Tonight on Arizona Week, getting young people college ready and career ready.
Production of Arizona Week is made possible in parts by a grant from the Stonewall Foundation and by the members of Arizona Public Media. Thank you for your continued support. Once again, your moderator, Michael Chiha.
Atop the list of what attracts business is an educated workforce. In Arizona, that's been an issue given public school funding and student achievement. This week, hundreds of business people, policymakers, and advocates met to discuss education and how it feeds economic development at the Morrison Institute for Public Policy's State of Our State Conference. We were there and spoke with several attendees, starting with Morrison policy analysts Sapna Gupta and Ken Western, whose research on economics and education supported the conference. Mr. Western, you detail in your report quite a number of economic development organizations in Arizona. Are there too many? Is there independence among them and no strategic direction for the state in that regard?
I wondered about that when I started the report, and when you start to delve into it, you've got 91 incorporated cities and towns that are doing economic development to some degree. 15 counties, big economic development groups like TRIO in Tucson, GPEC in Phoenix. Now you've got the Arizona Commerce Authority, which is about a year-old private public organization. Beyond that, you have scores of chambers of commerce. Universities are involved in economic development, community colleges. The list is almost limitless, and you've got business people involved. So I wondered too many. In the end, I decided it's almost, there's a safety net maybe with all these different groups interlocking. They're helping out each other. And with all these different groups, you saw the small towns especially are working together. They may be 100 miles apart, and they're pitching in and trading information and leads. And if we can't land this business, maybe you can do it. So good cooperation, and I think that's where the if you want to call it an industry economic development, is headed, with Arizona Commerce Authority providing somewhat overarching authority or support, and then GPEC and TRIO kind of leading the way, and then the other organizations filling in their own areas certainly, and then around the edges.
So they're doing work on the ground, but from a larger strategy point of view, you pointed out in your report that there's not a real solid economic ID for Arizona. What can be done to improve on that?
Well, that branding and marketing has always intrigued me. How's a state perceived by other states and cities? And I know everyone recognizes Arizona is known for its sunshine and tourism and the real estate industry. And as we got into it, it became clear to me that three things can really identify the state of Arizona, and that's entrepreneurialism, opportunity, and innovation.
But perhaps a negative is a lot of discussion about the educational system. And Ms. Gupta, you studied the CTE system and what's going on with that in Arizona as far as providing educational opportunity. Would you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. CTE stands for Career and Technical Education. Historically, CTE used to be called vocational education, used to be thought of as the track that's for students who are not going to go to college, who probably will end up in jobs that do not require much academic training. The thing is, though, the economic landscape has changed in the world, in the U.S., but in Arizona specifically as well. And CTE has evolved along with it. And so what CTE does is provide, usually at the high school level, a very practical, hands-on approach to preparing students for a particular career. Now, the range of CTE offerings in high schools are very varied. They go from preparing in a career in cosmetology to preparing for careers in the STEM field, as well as pre-engineering fields. So one of the things that's happened in Arizona is that CTE has evolved over the years to respond to some of the demands from employers.
In fact, you mentioned STEM, and for our viewers, that's science, technology, engineering, and math curriculum, and tracking to often get into college with those. So Ms. Gupta, with the idea of CTE programs in place, perhaps as a response to needs on the economic side or on the workforce development side, do we see progress with that in Arizona now?
So there is progress in that, especially with career and technical education course offered at the community college level. Those are developed in partnership with industry. So administrators at the community college level look at changing demographics, but they also involve employers in developing what kind of courses are going to be offered. That's also happening at the high school level. Now, about 88% of the CTE courses that are taught at the high school level in the state of Arizona are taught and funded through the Joint Technical Education Districts, which are school districts that are formed specifically to fund and administer career and technical education. The JTEDs also involve industry in developing the curriculum. In many cases, the CTE courses, such as in automotive technology, have industry partners who not only provide the equipment that's used for these courses, but they also help determine the curriculum and the training. But there's always improvement that can be made in that regard. But a lot of work is already being done in partnership with employers.
Now, speaking of the employers, is there a chicken and egg here, Mr. Western? Do the educational systems need to be more responsive to what's going on the business side or on the thinkers and doers behind economic development strategy?
Well, we didn't get into that specifically. We were just trying to figure out what's happening out there with the economic development landscape. But I attended one conference where the speaker was a recruiter trying to tell cities and towns, here's what you need to do if you want businesses to locate in your community. And what came through is we're not just hiring a workforce now. We want the workforce 5 and 10 years from now. So that means it just always comes through. They want people as educated as possible and to have the skills from computer and math and science back to the STEM skills. Those are more stressed than ever. And one of the studies showed Arizona higher education ranks 50th in terms of percentage of STEM graduates, which is about 19%, well behind everybody else.
One thing I want to pick up on what Ken said is that economic development is intricately connected with education and in terms of preparing our workforce. And from my prior experience working in economic development, often companies or employers who are looking to relocate to Arizona would look at the workforce and would say, is the workforce that we need now, do they have the skills now? And can we see 15 years from now, 20 years from now, because these are all long-term decisions. Are we going to have the skilled workforce? And I think CTE, when it's delivered in a high-quality level, in a rigorous manner, can actually fill a large gap in that regard in terms of preparing our future workforce.
How does that translate into educational reality? Cte McDonald, principal of Metro Tech High School in Phoenix, told me in this interview. How is your high school different than a traditional high school?
Well, one of the biggest differences is that we have 19 CTE programs. So every one of our students takes a CTE program as part of their educational day.
And CTE is?
CTE stands for Career and Technical Education. And so our programs range from things like cosmetology, culinary arts, automotive, to engineering, health careers, computer networking. And so when our students are juniors, they go into a CTE program that they spend about a little over 2 hours in as part of their day. And the beauty of that is that they are learning how to apply some of the education and skills that they have had in their academics. They're applying that within a career environment. And they're also being able to really think about, where do I want to go past high school, past college? Where do I want to spend my entry into the career world, and then what kinds of skills will I need for that? And so that makes our school a little bit more unique because every student is given that opportunity as part of their day.
And so what unique role does it play in the grander scheme of education in Phoenix?
Well, I think what it does is it provides a model for the idea of balance, of integrating the career and college readiness together. Because we have a lot of talk now about college readiness because we're very focused on rigor, we're very focused on academics, we're focused on college readiness measurements. But college is only a gateway for your career. And although it is true that not every student will go to college and that you can have a very highly satisfying career without going to college, but it would be difficult to do that without having the academic confidence that being college ready can give you. In other words, I might choose a career that doesn't necessarily need a college degree, but I want to be prepared in that career to take other opportunities as they become available, either through my own choosing or because that career, that industry has shifted, as we know in today's world can very much happen. So what CTE does is it provides an opportunity for students to be thinking about career readiness as well as college readiness.
Now, the old school terminology for CTE is vocational school. And old school thinking, and perhaps even contemporary thinking, is that it's one or the other. It's vocational or CTE, or it's college bound. But that's not the case as you're describing it.
Not at all. And that is still a perception that we work with, both with students, with parents, with teachers, with the larger community, is that a kid has to choose where they're going in life at the age of 14 or 16, and then they're put on a track, and that's it for them. And we know in reality that that's not reasonable, nor is it really equitable. But what we want to do is we want to offer, as I said, career and technical education programs as a way either for an entry into a career or just to get some skills that might be useful for you in no matter where you go. I gave an example a little bit ago of a student who was in our cosmetology program. And he has followed that program because his mother's a cosmetologist, his aunt's a cosmetologist, and so he's comfortable in that environment. But when I spoke to him about his dream, he said, no, I'm not planning to be a cosmetologist. I want to be an attorney. But I have to go to school for a lot of years to do that, and that's expensive. So this skill will allow me to be able to pay my way through post-secondary academic career that I'll need in order to go into my chosen field of being an attorney. And so there's just a danger in trying to track kids one way or another. And today's CTE program looks a lot different than the old school vocational shop class or home ec class that some of us have in our heads about vocational schools, our vocational programs, because the academic rigor is embedded in CTE programs as well as those soft skills. And so the expectation and the outcomes for CTE programs are broader than just a certain skill set you need for that particular program.
Do you find other students making that dot connection that the one student made, I need to do this to be able to pay for the education that I truly want? Is that something that's encouraged on your faculty and among your counselors? How does that work?
Yes, it is. What we try to do is in their sophomore year, as they're getting ready to select the CTE program that they're going to stay in for 2 years as juniors and seniors, is we introduce them to the programs. But we have also, from the time we had them as freshmen, we've been working with them on their what we call our 4+4 plan. What's your 4 years of high school, and then what's your 4 years past high school, and where is that going to take you? And to be thinking about the programs that we offer. We have 19 on our campus. Of those programs, which one will be best to leverage you into where you want to go. And it might not be a direct alignment with where you think you might want to go into a career after you're done with your academic pursuits, but it can possibly assist, supplement, or propel you into that.
An issue that comes up in Arizona education constantly, and we heard it here during the conference, is the lagging success for the Latino population. Your school is 96% Latino enrollment, I believe you said, but you're not experiencing that lag for your students. Talk a little bit about that, and then I want to ask you what accounts for it.
Well, we are. We're very proud of our successes. As you said, we're 96% Latino. We're 75% of our students spoke Spanish as their first language, so we have some language acquisition issues. And 87% of our students qualify for free and reduced lunch. So we have poverty, second language learners, and Latino minority demographics at our school. But we also have a 90% graduation rate. Our dropout rate is less than 1%. 99% of our students have never had a serious discipline referral. We meet or exceed the state average. So our kids outperform the other kids in the state on an average.
So why is that?
It's a variety of reasons, and you know, there's never one simple kind of smoking gun reason, but it's a variety of things that we do, and I believe you can kind of frame it within what we call the 3 R's: rigor, relevance, and relationships.
How do you get the average Arizona taxpayer to understand the relevance and importance of CTE education in relation to the economy?
Well, I think our school speaks for itself, and I think that's one of the things that I'm very pleased to be able to share, is that we can be a model for what is possible, for the promise of education for students, and especially the population that we serve, because we have been underserving many of our kids in the state, and this is a model of how we can serve their needs. It's not the only model, it's a model. And I think by telling the story, the Metro Tech story, is one way. Getting people to come onto the campus is another way, to see our campus, to see our students, to see what's happening on the school is another way that I think is very important to the education of the public.
Metro Tech is doing it. Can other schools do the same? McDonald tells how in a longer version of this interview on our website, azweek.com. There you'll also see longer versions of all of tonight's interviews. Now for a look at the higher education perspective, here's Arizona State University President Michael Crow. Is higher education in Arizona fulfilling the mission needed to grow the economy?
In Arizona, I think higher education is working valiantly to fulfill that mission, but we're not quite there yet, and I'm talking about the entire sector, not just the public universities. We're about 30,000 graduates per year short of what's necessary to resupply and enhance our economic opportunity just from what we can produce within the state. That's about a 50% scale up from where we presently are. So we have a long way to go to enhance our ability to have the economy get to the most competitive positioning.
And how do we fulfill that gap? How do we close that gap?
I think the Regents universities, Arizona, ASU, and NAU, will take about half of that. And then private colleges and private for-profits will have to pick up the rest of that. Most importantly, what we have to focus on is we have a pipeline issue. So we have insufficient numbers of students coming up through K through 12 to actually provide the starter material to get to the college graduate. And so we've got to really spend some time focused on our pipeline.
You talked in your speech to the Morrison Institute conference about the equality issue. Does that play a role in that pipeline that you're talking about?
Absolutely. The notion of, I talked about equality and education, and so this notion of justice through equality. Equality is a factor in the pipeline, in the sense that what we need is we need people capable of having access to that which will make them a 21st century educated individual capable of contributing to a 21st century economy, and that means making certain that schools can deliver that to every child.
Does Arizona have the right vision for its economy, including the educational factor that feeds the economy?
You know, I think that Arizona has an directionally correct vision, but it's inadequately empowered. So Arizona is a place built on this notion of free spirit and independentness and entrepreneurism and so forth. But to enable that, we need a social infrastructure through education that has able-bodied men and women, young boys and young girls, produced from this system that enable us to attain that vision. Right now, we're not on that path quite yet. We need to devote more energy to that.
Are you referring to a collaborative effort that needs to be done statewide that you don't see now?
No, what I'm referring to is that what we need is more of a relentless focus on Arizona's vision of itself, and that as a part of that, what we need is at the root of that is a focus on this notion of justice through equality, all people being equal and being treated fairly and equally under the law. And then also what we need is a focus on educational attainment. We don't yet have that mindset that educational attainment is as important as it is. I'm not quite sure why, but we don't quite have that yet.
And how do we get to that? What needs to be done in the public education realm informally kind of marketing, I guess, is what I'm alluding to.
Well, it's not just marketing. So I think what we need, where we need collaboration among and between all the schools, K through 12, the universities, the community colleges, and everyone, is we just need to go into a mode that the model that we have now, for the most part, got us to point B. We need to get to point A. To get from point B to point A, we must have higher levels of innovation, higher levels of creativity, new ways of doing things, new ways of attacking the problem, because we're not going to be able to do it based on the old methods. And so collaboration through innovation.
Is what you see going on at state government level and at local governmental levels in terms of supporting that notion adequate at this point?
No, it's not adequate, because our performance numbers indicate that we're not making as much progress as we need to be making. And so that means all things. We should just go down to sort of zero base and reconsider the structure of everything so that we can attain these educational outcome objectives that we need to attain.
The leg up for many would-be college students is financial aid, but it's more than just that. As the Helios Education Foundation's Paul Luna told me, Helios uses its $500 million endowment to provide scholarships and college readiness programs in Arizona and Florida. Now, your foundation provides a lot of the funding that helps support students in higher education. What more is needed besides that to make students successful in school?
I think what we have found at the Helios Education Foundation is that investment in education is a critical factor, but it is just one of the critical factors when we talk about what really needs to be done to improve the quality of education in our states and, quite frankly, in our country. I think what's important, and I think what we've learned through our work, the Helios Education Foundation was established in 2004. So we're a relatively new foundation. Our mission and our commitment is to help all students in Arizona and Florida, those are the two states that we serve, to be successful in post-secondary education. And some of what has really crystallized in our partnerships has been ensuring that students are academically prepared when they graduate from high school, that they have a college-going culture, that they have the support system and network around them to help them be successful on this academic journey.
Now, that college-going culture, as you call it, is an important factor, especially in low-income or emerging economic groups. How do you instill that?
And I think you're absolutely right on the importance of this idea of a college-going culture. We sort of identify from a Helios perspective the target population of first-generation college students. Not necessarily any one ethnic background or point of view, but this idea that says how do we reach and engage in traditionally underserved communities where these first generation college students can emerge. We fundamentally believe that education changes lives and makes communities better. So when you start to talk about a college-going culture, there's multiple facets to that. One of it is as it relates to the students, and that's why we have a point of emphasis on the academic preparedness of those students. We can help and get a student excited about going to college and being successful, but if they're not academically prepared, the likelihood of them being successful is very low. At the same time, we have to build an understanding and commitment of the family and the community around those students, because too often times it's been historical barriers that have prevented that first-generation college student from being successful. That old idea that says, well, kids from this school or that community or from your background, they don't go to college. Well, that has held back too many students that we believe and we have seen and learned have the potential and the ability to be successful in post-secondary education.
How do you instill in those students and in their parents that the real goal here is an economic goal as opposed to just attaining a degree?
I think that's a really good point. And I think that is part of what we would call the creation of that college-going culture. It's understanding the economic impact that post-secondary education success, college success, if you will have on a student and a family. Because there are trade-offs. And culturally, you have challenges where if prior generations have never had the ability or the opportunity to achieve higher levels of academic success, it's harder for them to understand the value of what that will mean for their children or for their students. So what we have to do is educate the student and the families to understand that the long-term value of that education will reap benefits back to the individual, the families, and the communities that they come from.
A lot of what you're talking about is individual-based or family-based motivation and spurring action at that level. But are there things that we can do in society in the larger sense, publicly and privately, that can help spur this?
I think the role of the public in education of all students is critically important. And in fact, I would tell you, I think we really believe that's where it begins. If we want to create a world-class education system in the state of Arizona, it's going to happen only if the state of Arizona and the individuals in the state, the public, if you will, demand it. And so that's where the impetus of improving education is going to come from. And it begins with the state itself understanding the economic future of our state and what role education plays in ensuring the type of economic future that we want for the state of Arizona. So every individual has a role to play to champion education, we believe. Every individual has to understand the global realities of the types of jobs that our students are going to be competing for in the future. And the level of education we're providing today is insufficient to ensure that our students are able and ready to compete for those future jobs.
Do you see the public sector motivation in that regard now? Does the public sector, do politicians and policymakers in Arizona understand that they have to have that commitment?
I think that's an area where we need to grow support with our elected leaders, with education leaders, and back to everybody, from everybody's perspective. I think too often we're complacent when it comes to education in our state. In an effort to ensure that we are appropriately recognizing that there are some really bright spots academically and from an education perspective in our state, and there are. However, I think sometimes in an effort to ensure that we're not essentially making people feel bad in terms of what's being produced today, we don't fully recognize and acknowledge that there needs to be improvement. We do absolutely need to raise the bar of expectations of what we have and what we expect from our students in order to be able to ensure that they're ready to compete.
Thanks to the Morrison Institute at ASU for giving us full access to the conference and its participants. More information from the conference is on our website, azpm.org. That's our program for Friday, November 30th, 2012. Next Friday, 71 years after the day that will live in infamy, the memories of those who experienced the horrors of Pearl Harbor and its aftermath. For Arizona Week, I'm Michael Cheehock.
Production of Arizona Week is made possible in parts by a grant from the Stonewall Foundation and by the members of Arizona Public Media. Thank you for your continued support.